Hello everyone, this is Romain Fontugne from IAG Research Lab, and today I present a method we propose for monitoring RPKI delay. Using this method, we've got a much better understanding of the life cycle of RPKI objects, and we found and reported issues with 2 RIRs and 1 Tier 1 network. So first of all, if you are not familiar with RPKI, let me just cover the basics of it. You can see RPKI as a database that contains signed objects. These objects are signed using private and public keys, so we can build a chain of trust. That means when a network operator adds a new object in RPKI, then the other operators can be sure that this information is legit. The most common objects you'll find in RPKI are ROAs, which stand for Route Origin Authorization. This is a way for operators to say, I want this prefix to be originated by this AS, so that routers on the internet can later use this information to prevent, for example, BGP hijacks. This process of the router using ROA data to filter routes is called Route Origin Validation, ROV in short. And there is 3 different outcomes when a router receives a new route. Either the prefix is not in RPKI, so in that case, it cannot really classify the route. But if the prefix is in RPKI, then the router will have 2 choices here. It will check if the information in the ROA, if it matches the route it received on BGP, then this route is valid and it will be accepted by the router. Otherwise, it's an invalid route and the router will drop the route. So ROV is of course a bit more complicated than that. When you dig into the details, you have to look at 2 different things that run in parallel. First, the control plane with BGP, and then the management plane with RPKI. So for example, in this diagram here, you can see a prefix holder at the top that wants to change how prefix is routed or maybe start using a new prefix. And to do that, he first has to register the route in RPKI and then announce it on BGP. These 2 pieces of information are traveling differently. In BGP, it's pushed along the topology, and for RPKI, there's a lot of different steps. At first, at the RIR, where the RIR is creating and publishing the ROA, and then the ISPs that are doing ROV, they're gonna have to pull the new ROA from the RIR and then make use of it. So the question we try to answer here is how fast does the ROAS travel from the prefix holder to the ASs doing ROV. The BGP propagation time have been studied quite a lot in the past. We know that it usually takes about 1 minute for a route to propagate in BGP or less than that. But the propagation time in RPKI is not really well understood. So in this study, we try to measure how long it takes for RIRs to create ROAs, to publish them, and then how much time it takes to see ASs on the internet using those ROAs. These are very important questions for operators because if they have to change a route quickly, and that was not planned in their RPKI data, then the operators want to push RPKI data as fast as possible to make sure they won't be filtered out by ROVs. To answer these questions, we have designed and set up an experiment for which we got experimental prefixes from the 5 RIRs. We did 2 experiments, but I have time to explain only one here. And in that experiment, we announced prefixes from an AS that has 2 upstream that are implementing ROV. We have implemented script to automatically create and delete ROAs at RIR's portal or using their API if they have one. So with that setup, what we do is we toggle our RPKI data and see how the internet reacts to it. To be more precise, we first announce our prefixes on BGP and create a ROA to make this announcement invalid. So at this point, they will be dropped by ROV. And then it's when we start the toggling. And the toggling consists of creating a ROA that this time makes the prefix valid. After creating the ROA, we wait a bit and monitor what's happening. Then we delete that ROA. The route becomes invalid again. And again, we wait and see what's happening. We repeat this process daily, and we did this for about 11 months. To monitor what's happening during this experiment, we use different data sets. The first one is our own logs that just record when we ask RIRs to create and delete our ROAs. Then we use RPKI views, which is an archive of ROAs, so we can track when our ROAs have been made public. We also look at the impact of our ROAs in BGP using RIPRIS and also in the data plane using traceroute from RIPAtlas. So this table here shows a summary of what we have observed when creating ROAs. Each column in the table represents a different step in the propagation of the ROA, and the line shows the 5 different IRs. The value in the table are the median delay in minutes, and the value in the brackets are for IPv6. First, you can see that at the very first step, most IRs will create the ROA within a minute. There is one exception though, it's Epinic, which has a median delay of 10 minutes. And of course, this 10 minutes will be visible, will be added for all the following steps. The other thing you can observe in this table is the very long delay for Arin and LAAS-CNRS that is visible from the publication delay. This is a problem we found that was due to the usage of a wrong time zone for a timestamp in ROA called not before. This problem made the publication of our ROAs to be delayed by up to 5 hours. And we've reported that problem to them, and they quickly deployed a fix for it. The last important bit from that table is the jump you can see from the publication delay to the relying parting delay. If we look only at Afrinic and RIPE, you can see that most of the overall delay we see at the end in BGP comes actually from this step here. This is because ISPs have to frequently poll IRs to get the data from the publication point, as opposed to in the other steps, the data is pushed from one step to another. Now, these tables show the median delay, but this time it's when we delete a ROA. In the previous table for the creation of ROA, the median delay overall was around 15 to 30 minutes, but here for the deletion, it goes up to 1 hour. And this is because when deleting a ROA, all relying parties within an AS should all withdraw it to really affect the routes. So the time it takes will be mainly driven by the slowest relying party. And also across ASs, because of BGP percenting, BGP will try to maintain reachability to our prefixes as much as possible. And of course, that's also the other process. We have more detailed results. For example, these are the delay for our 2 upstream, entity and sprint. We could also see the issue we had with Arin and LAAS-CNRS here. And what we found is that sometimes sprint was very slow to delete our ROAs. We reported that to them, and they found that ROAs could be stuck in the setup, and they quickly fixed that too. that's a good example showing that monitoring these pieces of software is very important for the good functioning of ROV. And we can only recommend network operators to do so, and why not researchers to help them doing that too. Okay, this is just like a very brief overview of our study. If you are interested in this study, I recommend you to read the paper. We have a lot more details in it. We analyzed trace route data. We also done longitudinal analysis looking at the ROA payload. We also described some differences we see between ROAs that come from different RIRs. And we give some of the challenges and limitations for this kind of experiment. Okay, this is the conclusion of this presentation. We have designed and set up an experiment to measure RPKI delay. We have discovered issues in 2 RIRs and 1 tier 1 network. We also found that RPKI is order of magnitude slower than BGP, which can of course impact the daily work for network operators. And finally, our recommendations are for IR to publish ROAs as fast as possible, and of course for ISP also that they should pull RPKI data as frequently as they can. Our dataset is available at this URL. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions, and thank you for your attention.